Thank you, Mandy. All right. First thing first, thank you all for being here. And before we get started, I would like to start praying. So let's start opening the time for who really matters and for the one who allows us to be here tonight. Dear Lord, we thank you for tonight. We thank you for, at least for me and for my family and for all of us who are able to make it here. As I always pray, I say little things like, thank you that all of us were able to wake up with a roof on our heads. There was no cracks, no one got broken into, no one got hurt, and we're all here. And that's a gift. Every second is a gift, and we thank you because those little things are your gifts. They're not free, and they're just given by grace. And thank you for keeping us here tonight. I ask you that we have a good time tonight and learning something good, and we can apply to our life. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray this. Amen. All right. So, timer starts. There you go. Cool. Well, first and foremost, yes, I got the chance to talk about the wise man that controls his emotions. So my question to all of you guys is, who can define what is wise or wisdom? How will you define someone? A wise woman, a wise man? Yes? Someone who believes in God and does the right thing to do. Yeah, that's very correlated to that. What else? Yeah, someone who serves and learn from experiences of others. Absolutely. We go to this next slide, please. So I wanted to start by defining what it is. And if we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So let's define what's wisdom, and I also want to define what is emotions. At least how the biblical language define it. First thing first. So wisdom is the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment, and the quality of being wise. So we do this a lot in my work. We tend to, how can we summarize that in one small sentence that anyone can understand? Knowledge or experience is us going to see a fire. We put our hand, we get burned, we learn from it. Wisdom is being that person who saw that person who put their finger on the fire and learn from it. So, right, wisdom, you learn from other people, you learn from history, you learn from your old elders, so you don't have to do it yourself. All right, emotions. Simple emotions. I think the first thing that comes to my mind when you think about emotions is what? Love, happiness. That's what the American dream is, or that's the life, the goal everyone wants. But what do most people want in life? Yeah, pretty much being happy, feel loved, feel valuable, feel respected, feel cared for. That pretty much is emotions. That's all emotions. Now, I wanted to start with, I have two people that really, one is biblical, and there are many multiple biblical guys that will give you the characteristics and the adjectives of what really means being a wise person who controls his emotions. And there's another person who is not biblical, but I thought, hey, this person served in the armed forces, and when I first heard his story, it really meant a lot to me. So, first thing, we go to the next slide. Have any of you have done any of those things that you've seen in the screen? Any of those 5 things? Yes? All right. You see the camping. If you zoom in, well, it's hard to see because of the PowerPoint, but if you see exactly, well, you know where the camping is taking place? That's right. So why do people do all those things? Skydiving, diving in the ocean, hanging out with bears, all the crazy things that if you ever try to get insurance for life insurance, they will tell you will never insure you. Why would people do that? Adrenaline, feeling important, be able to say, hey, I've done this. Being able to go to a place and say, I've done the craziest things in the world. Why? Because it makes you feel special. Makes me feel unique. Gives you that sense, I'm taking it to another level. Right? That's, in a nutshell, it gives you adrenaline, makes you feel good. And again, it's all about feelings. And feelings are just another word for emotions. It's just about how you feel good. And don't get me wrong, while a lot of those things, like the one in the bottom right, takes, a lot of hard work, someone to train their body to go down to those levels and decompress their lungs, and on the way down and the way up. In the end of the day, a lot of it's aligned with emotions, and it's still showing good characteristics of perseverance and hard work and so on. But let's go to the next slide, please. All right. So what does the Bible say about being full? And this is just the beginning. So I give you like the appetizer right here. So we have Proverbs 29. If you guys open your Bible, if you don't have it, you have it right here. 29 to 25 to 28. So it says, great causes fighting, trusting the Lord leads to prosperity. 26. Those who trust their own insight are foolish, but anyone who walks in wisdom is safe. 27. Whoever gives to the poor will lack nothing, but those who close their eyes to poverty will be cursed. And last verse says, when the wicked take charge, people do go into hiding, and when the wicked meet disasters, the godly flourish. If you go to the right side, a fool is quick to temper, but a wise person stays calm when insulted. So, if I ask you, if you look at when is the right time for a person to react, like by the emotions, would you say, will anything come to your mind? If you have to justify, when would that be?
Someone's attacking your wife.
That's 100% right. Wife, kids, your family, your loved ones, heck yeah. That's just normal instinct, right? I think you see that a lot also with moms taking care of their kids, our normal instinct. And brothers taking care of their sisters. And even Jesus, if we remember, he threw some tables around. So even Jesus had some emotions. And we will talk a little more about what type of emotions are good and what type of emotions we want to avoid. We go to the next slide, please. So, first character. This is a guy that we've been talking in our group, Daniel. Most people, I would say, that have seen the story of Daniel. Daniel is a very short book, 12 chapters, and it's all over the timeline. So you start from one point to the next one and then go back. But we're going to focus on Daniel, because I think Daniel, as we read chapter 1, and if you open your Bible in Daniel chapter 1, verse 8, and then we go to verse 15 after that. 8 to 15, yeah. So Daniel, for me, it comes in mind that anyone can control their emotions on any given day. I'll give you a perfect example. When you go meet the girl that you think you're going to marry for the first time, or you're about to meet the man that you're going to marry for the first time, or you're about to apply for your first job, or you're about to get into the college you want. We all can hide, and we all get that image of perfection. Or we're about to be on our first job because we went, by ourselves and said, we're going to put my own company. But Daniel shows something that is really, really the key, at least in my eyes, which is consistency. Throughout his whole life, he was consistent on how he trusts God and the things that he did. So let's go to Daniel 1, verse 8. And I'm going to read verse 8 all the way to verse 10 that I have here. It's in the NLT translation. Daniel 1. But Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating. Let me give you this before this. So we're talking about food. So a little backstory of what happened with Daniel. Daniel was in Judah, I believe, if I remember right. And it gives you a time lapse, because I like everything with times and math and works. Daniel's life took place around 500 to 600 years before Christ. All right? So he actually overlapped a little bit with Jeremiah. But Daniel was in Judah, and his place got taken over by a different king. And when he was taken over by a different king, the Bible doesn't say really if his family got destroyed or whatever, but he got thrown, he went to another kingdom. So he was under a different king, And he also came in with three more guys, so his buddies or whatever it might be. And during that time, he was young enough that the king asked his officers or his people, say, hey, go feed these people, we're going to train these guys, and Daniel was one of those. So in one of those, Daniel, the king gave an order, you have to eat this specific meat, I don't know if it was meat, but he had to eat this specific food, right? And Daniel was against it, he was against his religion in a way, he didn't want to eat it. So that's where it starts Daniel chapter in verse 8, it says, but Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and the wine given to them by the king. He asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable foods. Now God had given the chief of staff respect and affection for Daniel. Verse 10, but he responded, I am afraid of my lord the king, who was ordered that you eat this food and wine. If you be compelled then, compared to the other youths of your age, I'm afraid that the king will have me beheaded. So in other words, the king will kill me, right? So Daniel spoke, and I'm going to go a little faster. So we're going over a lot of chapters with Daniel, with the book of Daniel. Daniel got, God gave him some grace. He got to convince the chief of staff to say, hey, let me try my own food and pretty much test me. Test me for 30 days, test me for a window and see what happened. So that jumps to verse 17. So Daniel again was with three more guys, and verse 17 starts. God gave these four young men an unusual aptitude for understanding every aspect of literature and wisdom. And God gave Daniel a spiritual ability to interpret the meanings of visions and dreams. Verse 18. When the training period ordered by the king was completed, the chief of staff brought all the young men to the king Nebuchadnezzar, that king. The king talked with them, and no one impressed him as much as Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the royal service, right? So the army, the Marines, whatever you want to call it, whenever the king consulted them in any matter requiring wisdom and balance and judgment. He found them 10 times more capable than any other magicians and henchmen in his entire kingdom. So one of the things that Daniel was gifted is that also he didn't get to that point without looking healthy. Daniel had to look healthy before you go interpret dreams for the king. And you can see how God was very determined. Daniel was very determined on keeping his decision that he had made, and God was with him throughout the whole time. Daniel 2 goes into a time where the king has a dream, and Daniel interprets that dream. I mean, he's the only one in the kingdom that is able to tell the king what it was. And again, these dreams were not the kinds that I'm going to call angel and I'm going to tell you my dream, and maybe he interprets them so anybody can fake it. Back then, the king would say, no, you need to know what I dream even without me telling you. So Daniel was very, very, very favored by God because he was able to tell the dream that the king had. And not just that, also tell them what it meant, even when they're good news or bad news. So that was Daniel 2. In Daniel 3, Daniel, I don't know where Daniel goes, but maybe he goes and he got lost. In Daniel 3 is the famous furnace, the story that we know. You have three guys, so the book is focusing on Daniel, but then this book in chapter 3 focuses on his three friends, right? And to make the story short, in Daniel 3, the king makes a law pretty much, and these three friends end up going to the furnace. To a furnace that, in a short word, in that society, people didn't really like those guys because they were gifted. They were favored by God. So these three guys still did what was right, and got thrown into the furnace. And the Bible says how the king even went up and increased the temperature in the furnace because he wanted to make a statement, right? Whatever he says is what we do. So, as we read, I'm going to start in Daniel 3, verse 28, and it says the following. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, I'm going to say, praise the God of, says, praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angels to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Verse 29, therefore, I make this decree. If any people, whatever their race or nation or language, speak a war against God, of the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be turned limb from limb, and their house will be turned into heaps of rubble. And there's no other God that can rescue like this. So again, let's take a step back. What happened? They got thrown in there. Again, the king is talking like they survived to his whole kingdom. It's because God protected those three guys. Now, there was a fourth person that appeared there. There are different theories. Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ, they're the same. But there was a fourth person that they saw when the burnings happened. And they got out intact. Nothing happened to their skin. Nothing happened to their clothes. It was, of course, a miracle. So, then in verse 30, he says, on chapter 3, then the king promoted these three guys to even higher positions in the province of Babylon. So, we don't know where Daniel was, but then in Daniel 4, we go back and forth in time, and eventually Daniel sits, which is where I want to start, in verse 26 and 27. Daniel sits, let me put it here, I'll get it. Daniel sits is the famous time of the lion, right? So as you guys know, I don't know if you guys know, but those that don't know, Daniel was known for praying 3 times a day. And during that time, again, the people who were against Daniel and those guys tried to convince the king to make a decree, to make a law. And the law was simple. Pretty much for 30 days or for a stabbed period, you cannot pray to any other god besides the king. So they had to just praise the king, and the king. And Daniel, as you can tell, didn't follow those rules. But something interesting that, depending on your translation that you see, we don't know really how they captured Daniel, because there were some people who went and told the king. We don't know if he was praying on his balcony, on his window. He left his windows open, and we don't know even if there was a wind. He could have put his curtains back and don't mess with the king. But this guy's commitment and his emotions were not even part on how his life was, how he wanted to live his life for God. That he would pray regardless. He probably didn't even care about what was open and closed. So in chapter 26, if you start in verse 26, I want to go over that. So, when that happened, of course, they captured Daniel. There were some whispers that they found him. And the king, back then, just like today, once you pass a law, they had another law, which is you cannot really take it back, even if you're the king. So they really tried to outsmart the king. So the king had to, again, now put Daniel into the lions. And again, this is not going into the lions for an hour. This was literally a whole day, a whole night, for a very long time. And just as you're surprised, Daniel, I can imagine Daniel, I would be freaking out, but Daniel walking there, and again, we have no idea when God is going to take us, but Daniel was very sure about who he was worshiping and who he had his trust on. And in that case, God decided to save him that day. And eventually, he got saved, and when he got saved, they opened the whole place, Daniel again the lions were there, the lions were not dead, and Daniel comes out with nothing. Now, the people that were the whisper ones, that one who whispered all the things against Daniel, got thrown there on the bad side. So another thing is never to go against God, because sooner or later, God will get you if you're a believer or not a believer. But let's start with verse 26. So this is what it says. Daniel chapter 6, verse 26. I decree that everyone through my kingdom should tremble with fear before God of Daniel, for he is the living God, before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he will endure forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his rule will never end. Verse 27. He rescues and saves his people, and he performs miracle signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. Verse 28. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So, this guy in my book, Daniel is my favorite, actually my favorite chapter, book, probably of the whole Bible for me, because Daniel also got gifted, as it gets later, chapter 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, Daniel gets the gifts of seeing things that future, right? Battles, beasts, and we won't get into details. But this guy had all the reasons to give up on God, similar to Job. He got taken by a kingdom. Imagine if Russia comes here and we have to now fight for Russia if you're a man. And he kept his emotions aside. He could have told everyone, oh, well, God left me. And throughout the whole story, because when Daniel believed, if I look back at the timeline of Daniel was thrown into the lions, it looks like Daniel was quite an older person then. So it's not, this doesn't happen just in the first 10 years that he's young and strong. Daniel's showing resiliency just throughout his whole life, putting his emotions aside and trusting the God that he knows is the right God. And he had all the reasons. I mean, I have no idea, again, we will go back where his mom was, his dad is. I mean, most of us, if our mom is gone, or our dad is gone, or our sister or spouse are gone, most of us will go down to some type of medical, depression, or maybe we need some help, and it's normal. But Daniel was by himself, and regardless, he had to tell the kings the most awful, sometimes, interpretations. And what it means is telling a king, your kingdom is going to go down. What it means, you're going to stop being a king. You're going to be suffering for years. And even then, when the king could have said, oh, you're lying, you hate me, I'm going to put you in jail, Daniel decided to do the right thing. So, the other person, before we get down to emotions, that I want to talk to you about is it's a small video about a Navy SEAL guy that he received the first Medal of Honor during the war in Afghanistan. And I think it was kind of cool. It's kind of cool to still see people that have similar characteristics. Never close as Daniel, but to me, I mean, he did something that stirs a lot of brave. So it takes bravery and guts to do. So let's watch this video and we keep going.
Friend who went by Mikey or Murph. Michael also earned the respect of his men. They remember a wise-cracking friend who went by Mikey or Murph. They remember a patriot who wore a New York City firehouse patch on his uniform in honor of the heroes of 9/11. And they remember an officer who respected their opinions and led them with an understated yet unmistakable sense of command. Together, Michael and his fellow SEALs deployed multiple times around the world in the war against the extremists and radicals. And while their missions were often carried out in secrecy, their love of country and devotion to each other was always clear. On June 28, 2005, Michael would give his life for these ideals. While conducting surveillance on a mountain ridge in Afghanistan, he and 3 fellow SEALs were surrounded by a much larger enemy force. Their only escape was down the side of a mountain, and the SEALs launched a valiant counterattack while cascading from cliff to cliff. But as the enemy closed in, Michael recognized that the survival of his men depended on calling back to the base for reinforcements. With complete disregard for his own life, he moved into a clearing where his phone would get reception. He made the call, and Michael then fell under heavy fire. Yet his grace and upbringing never deserted him. Though severely wounded, he said thank you before hanging up and returned to the fight before losing his life. Unfortunately, the helicopter carrying the reinforcements never reached the scene. It crashed after being struck by a rocket-propelled grenade. And in the end, more Americans died in Afghanistan on June 28, 2005 than on any other day since the beginning of Operation Enduring Freedom. This day of tragedy also is the sad distinction of being the deadliest for Navy Special Warfare Forces since World War II. One of Michael's fellow SEALs did make it off the mountain ridge. He was one of Michael's closest friends. Petty Officer Marcus Luttrell of Texas, author of a riveting book called Lone Survivor, put it this way: Mikey was the best officer I ever knew, an iron-souled warrior of colossal and almost unbelievable courage in the face of the enemy. For his courage, we award Lieutenant Michael Murphy the First Medal of Honor for combat in Afghanistan. And with this medal, we acknowledge a debt that will not diminish with time and can never be repaid. Our nation is blessed to have volunteers like Michael, who risk their lives for our freedom. We're blessed to have mothers and fathers like Maureen and Dan Murphy, who raise sons of such character and courage. And we're blessed with the mercy of a loving God, who comforts all those who grieve. And now I ask Michael's parents to join me on stage, and the military aide will read the citation.
The President of the United States of America, in the name of Congress, takes pride in presenting the Medal of Honor to Lieutenant Michael P. Murphy, United States Navy. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, as the leader of a special reconnaissance element with Naval Special Warfare Task Unit Afghanistan on 27 and 28 June 2005. While leading a mission to locate a high-level anti-coalition militia leader, Lieutenant Murphy demonstrated extraordinary heroism in the face of grave danger in the vicinity of Asadabad, Konar Province, Afghanistan. On 28 June 2005, operating in an extremely rugged enemy-controlled area, Lieutenant Murphy's team was discovered by anti-coalition militia sympathizers, who revealed their position to Taliban fighters. As a result, between 30 and 40 enemy fighters besieged his four-member team. Demonstrating exceptional resolve, Lieutenant Murphy valiantly led his men in engaging the large enemy force. The ensuing fierce firefight resulted in numerous enemy casualties, as well as the wounding of all four members of his team. Ignoring his own wounds and demonstrating exceptional composure, Lieutenant Murphy continued to lead and encourage his men. When the primary communicator fell mortally wounded, Lieutenant Murphy repeatedly attempted to call for assistance for his beleaguered teammates. Realizing the impossibility of communicating in the extreme terrain, and in the face of almost certain death, he fought his way into an open terrain to gain a better position to transmit a call. This deliberate, heroic act deprived him of cover, exposing him to direct enemy fire. Finally achieving contact with his headquarters, Lieutenant Murphy maintained his exposed position while he provided his location and requested immediate support for his team. In his final act of bravery, he continued to engage the enemy until he was mortally wounded, gallantly giving his life for his country and for the cause of freedom. By his selfless leadership, courageous actions, and extraordinary devotion to duty, Lieutenant Murphy reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service.
So did anyone knew him or knew his story? He's very known in the CrossFit community because they do the CrossFit workout usually once a year. They do a bunch, they run, they do squats, they do like a bunch of pull-ups, but yeah, that's the type of workout I believe he used to do. If we go to the next slide, please. So, these two guys, and many people in the Bible, and many people that you can think about, whatever your idol might be, Jordan, maybe someone who's a singer, LeBron James, Tom Brady, whatever it might be, your idol, they all had characteristics that had to put some emotions aside. You don't get to be there, you don't get to accomplish something without putting some emotions aside. And I believe everyone in the Bible had to put emotions aside one side. So let's talk about feelings and emotions. And you can barely see the sign, but when what it says is when emotions control your life, you are a child. That's what I'll say. And I call it as blunt as it is. Now, do we feel things and it's normal to feel things? Yes. But when we let emotions decide what we want to do, that's when we get in trouble. And why? Because even when we go as adults and kids, when you go to a doctor, you see the things on the right side. Then you see every time you go to the doctor, give me a happy face from 0 to 1, how you feeling, and all so on. So we do everything based on feelings. And if it feels good, I do this. If I feel good, I get married. If I feel good, I come to church. If I feel good, I get that job. If I work, Monday to Friday, and I work from 10 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock in the morning, I go to work. If it's too early, I don't want to go to work. All those things are feelings. So I wanted to talk about some signs that your emotions are controlling you and that control people. As you can read, one is you have difficulty identifying your own feelings. And we see that in the society nowadays. We can take it from the smallest case to the most extreme, all the way from simple, I feel like maybe I don't want to get up today, to I don't know if I'm where gender I am today. That's one, identifying your feelings, to be honest. The other one is procrastination. Procrastination is another feeling. You let other things get ahead, and then you procrastinate, and things get rushed, and then things don't turn out as best as they should be. You avoid conflict. I'll tell you one thing that if you notice people, leaders, and when you start standing up for what you believe, conflict will come to you. Because as soon as you stand up for the true and do the right thing, you become like a target for the society. They don't want you to do that. They don't want you to be a leader. And in my case, it could be, you can be applied to you. If you're a kid and you're not married at any point, or you're a girl, is maybe listening to your mom, listening to your dad, protecting your brother, doing what's right, even when no one's looking. When you are, in my case, a little older, is being the responsible for my household and taking ownership for my household, and knowing that whatever happened to my household, God is going to, when I die, God is going to tell me, what the heck did you do with my household? Right? That's my responsibility, my wife. And also doing things like, when I see something wrong, regardless if it's at work or regardless if it's outside, you take a stand of truth and always standing up for what's right. If you avoid conflict, I would say don't look for conflict, but when you avoid conflict, it becomes it's like a muscle. You first say, I don't want to deal with this. So when something else bigger that you should have done, maybe you should have face and say, no, that's not the right way. You say, well, I don't do that. And eventually, you become a pansy. You become a soft guy, or soft mom, and a soft human being, that everything bothers you and you don't want to conflict anybody. Because if someone goes right, and maybe it's not a biblical stand, and you want to take your family and your parents or your kids to the left, you don't want to hurt no one's feelings. Next, you're often irritated and easily triggered. That's a big one. I did when I was younger. That was a pet peeve of mine, for sure, in some areas, because I was expecting people to react one way, and that's reacting to your emotions, right? If you don't get what you want, you cry like a baby. Next thing, I still struggle with this one, and it's okay to still struggle with things, is you constantly overthink things. So someone, as you guys might know, I'm into flying now, and I want to maybe fly one day commercially. And a friend of mine asked me this week, a Christian guy, he asked me, hey man, we were talking about this. If you're right in this position, what would you do? And again, in my time lapse, this will be like 4 years down the road. And honestly, that was the first time I was able to tell someone, I'm like, you know what? Usually, right off the bat, I would say, I want this, and I would have showed this, and I go this way, and I want this plane, and I want this route. I was, I don't know. I'm just going to let God help me decide the first 2 days, maybe first week, first month, and then I would think for the next 5 years. That's all. And I stopped overthinking things, because in the end of the day, I don't think no one in life that was 10 or 12, 18 years old, 20, 30, 40, decide my next 10 years are going to go this way, and then God comes and takes you 90 degrees to that side. So why even overthinking? Now, being prepared is a different thing. You can still think and prepare yourself. But that's one thing. Next thing, lack of self-esteem. Huge, 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 huge. And I was reading with my group a statistic yesterday that at any given point throughout your life is proven that we're all going to go through depression at one point. Now, I don't mean bad depression, but some sort of depression, regardless of how, if you're religious, not religious, if you are famous, because even famous people die, and rich people kill themselves. So regardless of what you have. But the self-esteem is a bigger one, because the lack of self-esteem was, at least in my eyes, was getting most people nowadays to be weak, to be pansy, to go against things, to not to take your stand as a person of true and do what's right when no one's looking. And it's because sometimes we think, oh, I'm not worth much, or I'm not worth anything. And if we go back to Daniel, guess what happened to Daniel? Every time Daniel and his friends committed to doing what was right, regardless of what they were feeling, more people got to be blessed, right? A whole kingdom got to be blessed because of the reaction of three people in the furnace and Daniel in the lions. So you want action, and not just those people, but those people had kids. So imagine the generations that got impacted because someone got the guts to do what's right and was right in terms of God. No one ever will know everything we do in our life, but God does know that. And God says, at least to me, eventually when I get to meet him, I feel like we're gonna have a good talk, and he's gonna ask me, what did you do with your talents that you had, or the few things that you had? It might be money, it might be whatever it might be. And I want to hopefully have a good answer for him, and we can do that by avoiding or acting by our feelings. So, before I keep going, I want to talk about Proverbs chapter 3, and this is a very, very famous verse 5 and 6, if you guys want to look for it. Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6. And it says the following: trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Get that last sentence again. He will make your path straight. Regardless of who you were, even David was, I would say for most people would say he was an amazing king. But he was very emotional. If you read Psalms, right? Sometimes you get him saying, oh, like if you listen to me, God, I'm crying about this and this. He was very emotional, even though God was able to do. But again, last sentence says, and he will make your paths straight. And paths straight, if you think about it, is all those little definitions and lives that we want to do. All of us have goals. Some of us are maybe about to go to college, we're about to go to high school. Some of us are about to have a third, 4, 5 kids. Some of us are about to get married. Some of us are about to be grandparents. Whatever it might, we all have different paths in our life that we're running at the same time. And God promised that if we put our heart with him, he will put us in the right path. So, I want to talk about Psalms chapter 12, verse 25. And this is a very short verse, and I'll read it for you guys. Psalms chapter 12, verse 25 says, anxiety in the heart of a man weights it down. What you have in your heart, regardless of how small it is, your heart is beautiful because you can put seeds of hope, or seeds of anger, seeds of worriness, or seeds of hope. And those seeds, if you don't treat them, eventually they grow. And maybe we get the wrong one. If we go to the next slide, please. So, how can we relate it to our own lives? I mentioned a couple examples of how we do it. But emotions is what causes today for men to leave their house, leave their wives, leave their kids. It's what causes today kids to get into drugs, or kids disrespecting their parents. What causes them? Moms leaving their household. Emotions, emotions, emotions are probably the biggest thing in our life, because if we do everything based on what we knew what was right, we'd be in a lot better place. But emotions, emotions, emotions. If I get this more money, if I get this better car. Emotions is why people leave churches, and leave not just churches, but leave families. You see that in 2020 when the whole politics, regardless of your political stand is, families were fighting against each other because, no, you're blue, you're red, no, I believe that. And people will not talk to each other. And emotions is what caused people to leave jobs. Emotions is what caused bankruptcies. Because it's all based on, oh, I'm in a job maybe, and I believe I deserve more. You know, I've been here for 3 months. I should be doing something better, right? Emotions, emotions, emotions. So, we talk about the heart, and I want to talk about the heart. How is your heart? And I mean it. How is your heart? And you know how is your heart because when you go to sleep every night, you have some thoughts, and when no one's looking, you think you know what's deep in your heart and what's bothering you. You might be scared of the bully of school. You might be scared of your parents that you stole from your parents. It might be that you wish you would have done something different. But what's in your heart? You need to put some insurance in your heart, protect your heart. We're in a society that everything's about insurance. If you think about it, you cannot drive without a car insurance. If you get married, eventually you get life insurance. If something happens to me, my family, my wife, and my kids will have something. You also get homeowners insurance. If you're in Florida, right? If a hurricane passes and it takes your home away, you put insurance. You insure everything. We insure a lot of things, but there's one key thing. You have to own that thing that you insure. And sometimes we don't own our heart. We let our heart own us. And what I mean is, what if you were running to your neighbor and you say, you know what, I want to put some fences around your house because of protection. What would your neighbor say? Yeah, he probably won't really like that, right? Even though you try the best things, right? What if you go to your neighbor and you say, or go to a friend, and you go to these people who live across, which we have one of them here tonight, and we say, you know what, I want to put cameras around here. I want to know what's going on in the neighborhood. No, nobody. They will be like, what's wrong with you, you crazy psycho? You cannot be looking at our life. When you have your heart and you own your heart, you need to take care of your heart. And that's how emotions come true. Biggest thing. What you see and what you hear will come into your heart, and what goes into your heart will come out of your mouth eventually. There was a guy in our church that used to come to our church. His name was Daniel. Many of you guys know him. He used to say, for the overflow of the heart, the mouth speak. And that's very, very true. Whatever your heart has, that's what you speak. A lot of times. And what happens nowadays is we let our heart, we go based on whatever our heart feels. And I'll tell you one thing. Some people say, well, I will say what I feel, which most people in society will say, oh, that's great. What good for you, you know. But if you do this, if you do that forever, this eventually is going, whatever you say, it's going to be whatever you feel. Get that again. If you just go and keep saying things, eventually you're going to believe that to yourself. So we need to cover our heart, protect our heart. This next slide says, God wants you to feel your emotions. He made us with emotions. The biggest verse in the Bible, John 3:16, what does it say? For God so much loved the world that he gave up his only son. So emotions are good, and we need to find the emotions that will get us there, to the right things of God. So, God never had a body like ours, or mind. You know, his mind is not like ours. He can actually think better things than we do, and more complex. But the Bible is clear that God was an emotional being. He felt emotions. We can see that. I have listed a couple of things. I don't know if you guys can read them. Joy. Jesus experienced joy when pleasing his Father. right? You get joy when you do the right things at work and your boss or your mom or your pastor or your best friend or your mentor to say, good job. You get joy from that. Jesus also experienced anger, right, of the hypocrisy of the religious leaders back then. Disgust, right? The greed, racism, oppression of the poor back then. Sorrow, all the amount of sin and death that happened. Compassion, because he died in the cross for us. He had to feel for the lost and for all of us. And lastly, agony. He failed things. He failed multiple things. He failed things all around while he was on earth, while he was suffering. And again, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So, as I'm finishing, as I'm getting to my last few minutes, if I have to summarize it in a couple of things, is you have to take ownership of your mistakes. We used to read we read a Bible when I was in our high school group, and a book that was about forgiveness. And one of the things they mention is you take ownership for your mistakes. The easiest things to do is to blame somebody else. You know, they say, well, I'm not doing good because of politics. I'm not doing good because my husband does. I'm not doing good because my dad does this. My mom does this. Or I'm not doing good because I don't have these papers. I don't doing good because of why. I don't have the... We take ownership of our emotions. I would say it's good to see God's emotions, and I want to leave you with a couple things, which is, how do we do it? Practical. Okay, we talk about this. How do we do it? Well, we all have goals in our life. I will share some, but let me hear maybe a couple goals. What are some goals that you guys have in your life? Maybe you have a one-day goal, a month goal, maybe a whole life goal. What would be some of those goals? Have a wife. Yes. Yep. What would be another goal? Travel. Yes. And it's good. And here's how we can help each other guide our emotions. And we talk about respecting our bosses, honoring our spouses, you know, but do you have goals that align with biblical principles? I have one goal. I told Janelle. I have multiple goals. My first goal, of course, is that I can make, when I get to heaven, I get to make, maybe hopefully God smile and say, you did good the way you raised your family, right? Now, apparently that's, I fail when you get someone safe, the joy that you get, nothing that I experienced before, no money. It's so different. I can imagine even God smiling at you saying, good job. Not you were perfect, but good job. But I had other goals. Let's take a step down. We all want to honor God. We all want to do the right thing. We all know the biblical answer. My goals are very simple. I want Aiden and Janelle to be proud of me by the time I get older. I want Aiden to grow up and say, I want to be like you, Dad. I want my daughters to grow up and say, I want a husband like Daddy. And in the end of the day, for those that are married, I want to make my parents and my wife proud of where I'm at now, where I'm at in the future. Those goals, if you think about it, for me to accomplish those, I have to do a couple things, right? If I get up and I don't feel like going to work, guess what? I go to work. If I get up and something gets broken in the house, guess who's going to fix it? I fix it. If something goes wrong and Janelle doesn't need something, my wife needs something, or my parents need something, who's going to fix it? Myself. I take ownership of what I can control, and I don't let other people, well, someone else does it. I take ownership, and I know that I want that. Men are simple. Men just want to make sure we feel respected and someone's proud of us. Very simple. And when you get your spouse to tell you that, of course, my heart goes up to the moon. Those are simple goals. Another goal is I want to be a dad, right? Maybe for your case. I want to be there for my kids. Simple thing. What does that? Well, most people say, I want to be a dad. Yeah, many people create kids, but many people are real dads. And what I mean is, my life goes God, family, everything else. No, God, work, work, family, work, work, family, and then I die and I realize my kids never really knew about me. That's simple goals, easy to action, but they take what? Consistency. Because I'm going to have 40, 30 years, maybe 50, 80 years. I don't know how long I'm going to be with. But what's your goal that you have in your heart to make your family, or maybe yourself, or God proud? They have to be achievable, easy to conceive. You see, my goals are not about getting the bigger house, or getting the bigger car, or maybe taking Janelle to every single country in the United States. No, because while they're good, and that will give me points, they don't translate to eternity. Does your goal translate to eternity? And by putting goals like that, that means I have to put my emotions aside, regardless of how I feel when we argue with my wife, or how I feel about my parents, and how I feel about my job sometimes. I get up, and I'm there because I have to be there. That's what I want you guys to take on. So, lastly, love your body and your body is your temple. So, just after, most people think about this verse in the sexual sense, but also I will highly suggest on how you think about money, how you think about people, what you listen to, and what you think about friends. And other things I mentioned here is just listening to your parents, church leaders, your mentors, having that joy. And praise God that He has given me more than I ever think. For those that don't know, I always tell people I feel more than blessed to be in the best country in the world. I love my home country, Colombia. The United States have done many things to me, giving me my wife, giving me everything, and I want those goals. I want those goals. At the end of the day, nobody's going to remember. No one's going to remember how much money you had. If I ask you, who are the last 3 richest people in the last decade? Can someone name them? No. Who was the second best soccer team that played in the final World Cup 8 years ago? No one remembers that. You might remember the winner, but can you name all the players? No one remembers those things. All those things are terrestrial, and they die and they go away. So, controlling your emotions, lastly, shows that you are mature. And that's the difference between a baby Christian and someone who's a Christian who knows that he's doing what is right when no one's looking. All right? That's all. Thank you, guys.